This morning's gospel reading is taken from the gospel according to Luke, the 15th chapter. Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen to Jesus, and the Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, "This fellow welcomes sinners, and he eats with them." And so Jesus told them this parable. Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me.' So the father divided his property between his sons. A few days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout that country, and he came to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his field to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare? But here I am dying of hunger.'" This is important. It's coming up later. "I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him coming and ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now the older son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. The slave replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has gotten you back safe and sound.' And the older son became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him. But he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, and now is found.'" Grace and peace to you all in the name of our still speaking God, who loves us just the way that we are, who loves us too much to let us stay that way. Will you pray with me? May these words of my mouth and may the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight, O God, for it is you and you alone who is our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So the gospel reading this morning is one of Jesus' most well-known parables. It is commonly referred to as the parable of the prodigal son. In fact, that phrase, prodigal son, is now a commonly used phrase in our language, right? It is seeped into the lexicon of the English language. You commonly hear somebody say, "Oh, look who's back! The prodigal son returns." You know, actually, when I was younger, when I was just a kid, I actually thought that that's what the word prodigal meant. That it meant wayward or wandering or lost, like somebody who went away and then came back. That's what I thought the word prodigal meant when I was a kid. But that's not what the word means. I looked it up, and the word prodigal, it means to spend money recklessly or wastefully. In that sense, it's easy to see how the son in Jesus' story is a prodigal son, right? He receives his inheritance from his father, and he goes out and he spends all of the money, right? Recklessly, wastefully. In fact, this is a story that is so well known to most of us. We have heard this story so many times in Sunday school and in church that it's a hard story to read with fresh eyes and to hear with fresh ears. It is a good principle of biblical interpretation that any story that everybody knows is a story that nobody has paid close attention to in a while. But this story deserves better. This story deserves our careful attention. Every story has worlds of meaning, just waiting to open up to us if only we will prod and provoke the story a little bit. And that is especially true of the stories that everybody knows, or at least everybody thinks that they know. So let's go deeper together into the story of the prodigal son, or as I prefer to call it, the story of the prodigal father. Our story begins, there was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of inheritance that will belong to me." He has no right to ask this of his father. This is a shameful thing for this son to think, let alone to say out loud to his father. Right? It is the equivalent of saying to his father, "Dad, I kind of wish you were dead." Right? He makes no effort to hide the fact that he doesn't really care about his father beyond what his father is going to leave him when his father passes away. That's the only thing that the son is interested in, the old man's money. More than that, what he is asking would bring shame upon the entire family. You see, the Jewish understanding of owning land is that the land is a gift. It is a trust given by God and kept in the family down through the generations. The land was something that you were supposed to pass down to your children. Right? In the Midwest, in farm country, where most of us have grown up in places where agriculture drives the economy. So most of us have at least some sense, even if we weren't farmers ourselves, of what it means to be able to receive a piece of land from your parents and then pass that same piece of land on to your children. But the younger son, he wants to take a portion of the family's land. He wants to take his inheritance from a father who is still living and sell that land to the highest bidder, thereby forcing his father and older brother to make their living on only 2/3 of the amount of land that they currently have. Most fathers would say no to this request. Most fathers would say, "Of course you can't have your inheritance now. I'm still alive. I'm still using it." But the father in Jesus' story doesn't say no. He agrees to give his son his share of the inheritance, even though he is still alive. The land is given to him, the son sells it, and the young man takes off with his money. The next few years, or maybe it was just a few months, is a blur. We don't get many details on how this young man manages to blow through so much money in so short a time. Dissolute living and prostitutes. That's all the more that the story says. That's as much detail as we get. Probably as much detail as we need. I imagine that that's probably all the more detail that the young man himself remembers of it. Right? Once you're on a bender like that, the details start to get a little fuzzy. This young man is in a fog, in a stupor, in a more or less permanent state of blacking out. And the young man does not come back to reality until the money runs out. And then one day he comes to his senses. He's out slopping hogs, animals that his religion has taught him from birth are unclean. And he is so broke and he is so hungry that he is jealous of the slop that the pigs get to eat. And that's when the young man comes to his senses and decides to go back to his father's house. But this, sisters and brothers, this is the important part. The first major thing in the story that everybody seems to overlook. When the young man comes to his senses, he does not say to himself, I miss the love and the company of my father and my brother. I miss being with my family at home. He doesn't say, boy, I sure feel bad that I was so disrespectful to my father. None of those things does he say in Jesus' story. Instead, what the young man says is this. How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough and to spare, but here I am dying of hunger? That's it. That is his motivation for returning home. The young man has made a simple calculation. He's hungry, and he knows where he can get food. That, Jesus says, is the reason that the young man decides to go home. And once he decides to go home, and I told you to pay attention to this part, once he decides to go home, he starts practicing his speech. He starts practicing what he is going to say to his father when he gets there. Even before he sets off, he is rehearsing what he's going to say to his father when he gets back home. And when he arrives home, his father comes running out to him, and the young man begins his speech just exactly like he had practiced it, and it works. The old man falls for it. Read this story again carefully. Listen to this story again carefully. This is not a story about a young man who has done wrong and feels guilty about it, whose heart is broken by remorse, and so he goes seeking reconciliation with his father because he feels guilty and forlorn. This is a story about a manipulative kid who needs something from his daddy and has figured out how to play his father like a fiddle. Reading this story, I don't think that this is the first time that this kid has gotten himself into this kind of trouble. I think that this young man has done this kind of thing before, if only because nobody can spend that much money that quickly their first time out of the chute. It takes practice to get that reckless with your money. Now, this kid has already learned how to live large on Dad's dime. And I don't think this is the first time that this young man has rehearsed a speech to get himself out of trouble. Maybe you know this kid. Maybe you know this kid. I do. This is the kid who turns 16, gets his driver's license, and then wraps his car around the trunk of a tree the very same week that he got his license, and manages to convince his dad to buy him another, newer car, because that car will have better safety features than the first one. Right? You know people like this. This young man has got Dad wrapped around his finger. You'll recall, as I said before, that the word prodigal, it means to spend your money lavishly, recklessly, wastefully. If prodigal means to spend your money recklessly, then this is the story of the prodigal father, every bit as much as it is the story of the prodigal son. When his younger son comes home, the prodigal father gives this young man the very best robe in the house. He has his servants kill the fatted calf so that he can give his wayward son a feast. And here is the kicker, my friends. He once again gives him a share of the inheritance. That's what placing the ring upon his finger symbolizes in the story. He is once again a member of the household who stands to inherit 1/3 of the now smaller farm. After giving his youngest son so much already, he gives him even more. More than most family farms can afford to give away. Against this background, the older son's reaction makes sense. I don't think that it's the older son is bitter or jealous. I don't think that's what's going on here. It's just that the older son has seen this play out before. His younger brother getting into trouble, and then dad using the family's limited resources to come and bail him out. And the older son is beginning to do the math. How long do you think this kid, this young man, is going to stay at home and work hard to carry his weight around the farm? Especially now that the work is going to be that much harder because they are going to have to be producing on a now smaller piece of land. This kid's not the kind of kid to stick around. He is not a hard-working kind. And when he leaves, he is probably going to talk his father into giving him another chunk of the family's fortune. And the father and the older son will be left to work that much harder in order to keep their ever-shrinking operation going. And yet, the father keeps on giving. The father keeps on giving his resources, his money, to this son who just keeps burning through it. This is the story of the prodigal father. What the father in this story does, it doesn't make sense to us. If this man was a friend of ours, we would tell him, hey, I know you love your son, but that boy needs some tough love. Right? That's the advice that we would give. We'd tell him, you need to let your son start dealing with some of the consequences of his mistakes, or he is never going to learn. But this father just keeps on bailing him out no matter how much it costs him. No matter how much it costs him. What the father does in this story, it's irrational. It's not sound financial judgment. He is recklessly giving money away to his no-good, deadbeat son. It is reckless. It is reckless. It's reckless mercy. It's reckless love. He keeps loving his son no matter how much it costs him. If he keeps this up, he's going to go broke. If he keeps this up, it's going to break him. Loving so recklessly, it's going to break him. On the cross, it is going to break him. Sisters and brothers, that's what the cross represents. It represents the body of Jesus being broken for all that is broken in our world and being broken for all that is broken in us. It is a scandal of cosmic proportions that God's own Son should be the price that was paid for us. What a reckless, prodigal grace. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in his book, The Cost of Discipleship, said that although grace is free in the sense that you and I cannot earn it, it is a gift. Although grace is free, it is far from cheap. Bonhoeffer wrote, such grace is costly because it calls us to follow, and it is grace because it calls us to follow Jesus. It is costly because it costs a man his life, and it is grace because it gives a man the only true life. It is costly because it condemns sin, and it is grace because it justifies the sinner. Above all, it is costly because it cost God the life of his Son. And what has cost God so much cannot be cheap for us. Above all, it is grace, because God did not reckon his too dear a price to pay for our lives. What reckless love. What wanton grace. That is the story of the prodigal father. And thank the prodigal father that we have been saved by the blood of the prodigal son. Amen.